Of course, what I've seen within the videos and early beta versions is, like, for instance, also the feature around AI. And my question would be, I mean, what I've seen is basically two directions within your AI that you take. One is to actually analyze or locate your own files on the Zima Cube. And the other one is basically that you showed an implementation of Stable Diffusion. Let me ask here from an UI perspective. So first of all, I would like to know what kind of tool are you using to go through your private files? I know, for instance, like Private GPT, who could do something like that, among others. And then the second question would be, what is the UI that you built on top, and what are you using there? Because at least I think I have not seen it so far, but I'm not sure if I'm right.
We started paying attention to this entire generative AI from the first day GPT came up. And we started investing our team resource, learning how to build a local AI. At the time, I think Llama, I think that's the first open source model released by Meta, previously Facebook. We started experimenting that. And the chat, namely, I think we gave a new name. I think it's called Zima Assist, but previously it was just chat. We built that from, I wouldn't say scratch, but we built that from like somewhere very close to the root. We're not using some pre-existing solution, just package it or just deploy it. So the model we use is just simply Llama 2. There's Llama 3 released recently, and due to the nature, the local hardware resource is constrained versus whatever running in the NVIDIA data center behind, Azure, behind Open ChatGPT. The original model simply doesn't get loaded into the GPU in the Zima Cube. So we basically look at the quantized model, which is 4B quantized. So in other words, it's think of you're watching a movie. You're watching a movie that was originally in 4K, and then you have a great time enjoying the movie. But let's say you're on a trip in your phone. You're watching like a 1080p movie. You can still get the story, right? You lose some fidelity, some details, but you can still understand what the story is about. So quantized model, it's the same idea. So it's the same model. It's simply it's lower precision. So so that worked pretty well on Zima Cube, and we use another framework called LangChain. I'm not sure if you've heard of that. Super popular. I don't think there's anything that's even comparable to LangChain. If you know, let me know. But we started learning LangChain from the early stage, and our chat app is actually built using the model and using the LangChain framework. It's simply an orchestration of your prompt engineering of the talking to the model and templating all of that. The UI, it's built from scratch. We previously were thinking about a UI framework called Radio, GRADIO. I'm not sure if you've heard of that. It's a framework specifically for building UI, but due to our need from product manager, we simply switch over to building a UI from scratch. Yeah, so that's the entire stack of our chat. We're not using some established solution. We build it from the bottom.
Yeah, and as you also talked about the learning journey there, I think it's quite plausible because I went through the same, I would say, process in particular when LangChain actually got a lot of traction, how to implement other LLMs for sure. What I lately saw, or I'm using myself because it's also integrated into something like Bluefin, is Ollama. And Ollama, of course, gives us the chance to not only implement Llama 2, Llama 3, and so on, but also a dozen of other LLMs that run locally as well. So did you have a look at that one as well?
We look at Ollama. The fact that I really like Ollama. It's actually in our to-do list. Lawrence knows about it. In our to-do list, I was talking to the team to switch over our entire, to rewrite our entire chat based on Ollama. It's simply that at the time we started to build chat, Ollama didn't exist. If I knew it will exist, I would probably go for Ollama. I think Ollama handles like a model downloading, model loading, all of that in a super convenient way. And it provides API. I really love to switch our current chat infrastructure over to Ollama, but unfortunately we started before Ollama existed, so we'll have to go with our first version. There's always newer version. Yes, it's in our radar. Yeah, Ollama is in our radar. Yeah.
And good, don't get me wrong, at the end, it's software development, right? And as I said, I'm going through the same journey and then embracing LangChain suddenly, and everything that was not possible before was suddenly more or less like seamless or more easy to install. So thank you for sharing for that. And since you mentioned Gradio, it might be the same with Stable Diffusion. I used to use first a UI on top of Stable Diffusion called Automatic 1111, and later on Invoke AI, and we also, especially Automatic 1111 uses Gradio, of course, as well. But I suppose, did you build the UI yourself then with Gradio, as far as I understood?
If you're talking about the Stable Diffusion, we actually used the Automatic 1111 UI. I just don't know. I just don't know if our engineers, our front-end engineers, has altered a little bit. To be honest, I never used the original web UI of Stable Diffusion. I only see our own web. I don't. To me, I'm focused more on the functionality. I didn't pay attention to the detail. So, but I think it is based on the Automatic 11 UI. And you mentioned about Invoke AI. I think it's a new.
It's new.
Yes. Yeah, I look at it only once. It's super promising, and that's another topic. Actually, I think very likely we will go into it. It's about the App Store, containerization App Store concept. We are actually looking at running all these AI-based apps, including Invoke AI, within a container, so that we can easily put these AI apps in a shelf in the CosmOS App Store. We're actually looking at that, but I think we can get into that later. Yeah.
That sounds fantastic. I mean, as you said, like, of course, Invoke is newer, but I think it's also way more simple than Automatic 1111 from a user interface. That sounds really fantastic. Which brings me basically to containerization, and I had a bunch of questions in those regards. Of course, I knew about from CasOS on the magic that you have in place with your App Store, with all the contributors from the open source community when it comes to Docker files or Docker Compose in that case. But the question that I have is rather like, of course, there's not only Docker, there are other ways on how to do a containerization. It might be through Podman, it might be even leaving containerization and going towards more LXC and so on, or DistroBox. So let me catch your thoughts on that and what ZimaOS will support.
Sure. There's a bit of history of containerization. Everything started off from the control group on the Linux, which isolates the processes of whatever Linux programmed, and then someone simply took advantage of the control group and then built the idea of containerization. But I think that That happened within Linux community, and then someone else took that opportunity, built Docker, basically an orchestrated version of the original Linux containerization, and I think they turned that into the company, and because it's commercialized in for the nature in the spirit of open source, people simply don't like anything that's commercialized, and then there's alternatives, and Podman is one of the alternatives. I like it very much. When it came out, I think at early stage I started playing with Podman, and there's also another alternative to the Docker. It's called Nerd Control. I'm not sure if you've heard of that.
No.
Yeah, you can look it up later. It's called NERDCTL. It's similar to Podman. I think Podman is from Red Hat, and Nerd Control, I think. I forgot what's the organization affiliated to it, but it's simply two alternatives to Docker. When I first joined this project, I seriously looked into Podman and Nerd Control, and I was seriously thinking about switching over from Docker engine to one of those. But the thing is that entire CastleOS was built using Golang, the Go language by Google, and we find the entire developer experience of Docker engine, it's simply awesome. It's a lot of resource. There's community behind it, and in contrast, Podman and Nerd Control, like I said, this team is new. There's no guru in this team. There are people who started learning about programming, within the company. I actually, to be honest, I started learning Golang after I joined the company. Before that, I was a Java guy. So with all that, we stayed with Docker engine because everything is well documented. After all, we deliver value versus trying to make everything more ideal. Like we focus on deliver value, and Docker engine simply meets that goal. Yeah, but who knows? In future, we might switch over to Nerd Control or Podman. Yeah.
And it's like there are, of course, crazy approaches going on. I mentioned Vanilla OS in the beginning, and what they do basically with APX as like I would say, meta package manager that goes under an equivalent to as DistroBox, and then you can basically use APX to install across the different operating systems, the packages, and so on. Of course, there's a lot of movement and innovation going on all the time.
Yeah.
Of course. Maybe as a last thing, what about the virtualization? I've seen basically, I think you call it ZVM, right? It's ZVM.
ZVM. It's a naming. It's a naming. ZimaOS Virtualization Management, ZVM. It's just a naming. Yeah. It's not a new technology.
So what are you using for that then? Because I couldn't find like detailed information. What kind of virtualization you use? Maybe you can tell me more about that.
Definitely, that's a great question. Again, everything we use to build ZimaOS is from open source, and we use underneath everything. It's a combination of QEMU and KVM. QEMU is an emulator of hardware, and KVM is a kernel-based virtualization management. Simply exposes underlying hardware resource directly to whatever apps within the VM. Those are the two technology underneath, but everything is exposed via a framework called libvirt, LIBVIRT. It's libvirt is like Docker if you compare to what we just talked about. that BERT itself is not virtualization, but it orchestrates, the management needs, the request from the app, and send whatever API over to either QEMU or KVM. So people always misunderstood between QEMU and KVM. They thought I can only use one or the other. In fact, the virtualization, the modern virtualization on the Linux, it's using a mix of both. There are hardware like a PCI host, like a sound card. All of those could be, say, emulated, but things like CPU or memory, even GPU, can be passed through via the KVM mechanism. So it's a hybrid of both. It is actually extremely difficult to use only KVM to do virtualization. So it has to be a combination of two. In other words, on the other hand, you cannot just use QEMU to emulate everything because it would be simply slow. So we use LabVirt. I think there's some other technology like a VirtualBox. I don't know much detail about VirtualBox, but simply because it's not open source, we considered that at the very beginning, but then we just decide we will stay with QEMU, KVM via the LabVirt. I hope that clarifies your question.
Absolutely, and it's great to get all the clarity. Since you mentioned so often open source and community,